don't want to take any time from our wonderful afternoon panelists, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to our afternoon panel discussions. This segment of the symposium is designed to encourage your audience participation. This year, we are absolutely honored to have 3 distinguished panelists, each with extensive experience in the assessment of student learning. Before they introduce themselves, here's how you can participate in our session. Post your questions in the chat. You can send your questions privately to any of the discussion moderators, or if you prefer to speak, you can raise your hand to let us know, and you'll have the opportunity to unmute yourself and ask your questions directly. So with that brief rule setting, I'll have each panelist introduce themselves. Joe Levy from Excelsior University. After Joe, we will hear from Johnna Darragh, followed by Tiffany Fries. Joe, would you please begin with your introduction?
Absolutely. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Levy, and I am the Associate Vice Provost of Accreditation and Quality Improvement at Excelsior University. My background has been in student affairs assessment, educational technology, academic affairs assessment, and accreditation. And I've worked at many different institutions. I'm on the board for the Student Affairs Assessment Leaders and an endorsed speaker for the National Institute for Learning Outcomes Assessment, and enjoy all things assessment, accreditation, and quality assurance. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to share this space this afternoon. My name is Johnna Darragh, and I am a professor at Heartland Community College in Normal, Illinois. I am the coordinator of our education programs. I have been the former director of our cross-disciplinary competency-based assessment project. And some of the space that's relevant to our conversation today is that I co-led a statewide competency-based assessment project in early childhood education, as well as have written numerous white papers and a book with Tiffany Fries on competency-based assessment systems, and in addition to really looking at statewide apprenticeship projects. So it's so nice to be here today with all of you.
So thank you all for having me. I'm excited to be here. My name is Tiffany Fries. I'm currently working on as an independent consultant for Verity CBE Design Solutions, helping others build CBE programs and to stand those up. Prior to my current role, I started in higher education at a university level, helping build and launch a 126 credit hour CBE program. I then moved into working more at the state level and helping build programs that were connected with workforce partners and building credentials that could be used across workforce agencies and employers. So, and then I actually had done quite a bit of consulting across the nation, helping others build programs in areas like culinary, ranging from culinary to hard technical skills like plumbing, heating and air, anything like that, you name it, I feel like we've built it. So I'm happy to be here and excited to talk about all the work we've done.
Thank you for those great introductions and being willing to introduce yourself. So we're going to go ahead and hop in. And just a reminder, so please feel free to put your questions in the chat, raise your hand, or give us a message. But we'll start off with some pre-prepared questions that we have just to get us rolling down that avenue while we wait for your questions. So on the alignment of competencies and workforce needs, in a rapidly evolving skills-based economy, how can higher education institutions effectively identify and integrate the competencies most valued by employers into their curriculum and assessment models? What mechanisms or partnerships have you seen successfully bridge this gap? And I'll go ahead and I'm just going to put that in the chat so everybody can see it, because I know for me, I like being able to see the questions as they answer it. So whoever wants to tackle that one first.
I'm happy to speak to that a little bit to kick us off. So one of the things I highly recommend that's been the most useful is just making those employer partnership connections. Connect with your employers. I know at the higher ed level, it seems a little bit daunting, more on your plate, overwhelming, but they want to be brought in and to breathe into what they would like to see from your graduates and what the pressure points are that they're struggling with as an employer. And so I would just highly encourage connecting with employer partners and other stakeholders like Chamber of Commerce, labor boards, your graduates who have gone to work for these employers. What are the competencies that have helped make them successful that they came out with from your program, but also those that they may have felt like they could have developed further to be more successful in their workplace role. So one of the biggest, I think, suggestions I would have is definitely connect with those stakeholders and let them breathe into the competencies that you're helping to develop in your students.
I just wanted to piggyback briefly on what Tiffany had said, that employer partnership is so incredibly important. And one of the things that we found just essential with that competency-based assessment system we developed statewide was the incredible importance of adaptability. And so one of the things that we heard from our higher education partners were that how our courses were designed within higher education was not necessarily compatible with how our industry recognized credentials were designed. And so when we looked at our courses and how they were traditionally designed, one of the things that we really had to move to across the state was the modularization of courses, where we really had to break apart our traditional courses and modularize them so that they effectively aligned with those industry recognized credentials and were leveled by roles within the field. And so when you're developing those effective partnerships, to have that bi-directional communication and be responsive to what you're hearing from the field.
And just as a follow-up, I know in education, sometimes we have difficulty thinking of different ways to meet with our industry partners. It's something that we know we should be doing, and you guys spoke very eloquently to the importance of that and making those connections. And so often we default to advisory groups, and that's just the tried and true method. Is there any other suggestions of creative ways that colleges or departments could form those industry departments besides going back to that, again, tried and true advisory meetings?
Things that I would share, and obviously not every institution has this, but we have a unit within our institution, strategic partnerships, and so they help leverage partnerships with companies, employers. Often that's on the side of trying to bring established partnerships so that students like come and they send their employees to our institution. But that's a great lever to use in terms of faculty talking with our partnerships people to give them data, give them information about the program, give them insights, course eval feedback, assessment result feedback, potential ideas for program design, because any good partnership needs to be maintained and nurtured. And so they have regular touch bases with those groups, and they can be using that information and getting that insight as part of just their daily business as well. And I think it's one of those things that can be on top of the advisory groups that may be happening periodically, but it's just another way too that then you don't just have your faculty or certain people telling that story of a given program. You're spreading that load and increasing your amount and networks of storytellers to tap in and create those opportunities to have these captive audiences and to open lines of feedback.
Dr. Levy. So with that being said, how do you do a crosswalk from the industry skills to the program, right? Because we're talking about the advisory groups and all that stuff, but how do you make them successful?
There's a handful of ways to try and connect that. One of the tools we've been tapping into is Lightcast, which has, it'll do some web scraping and pull information from job applications in certain industries, competencies that employers are looking for, and then they'll organize that around zip codes and industry and disciplines so you can get program specific reports from that. But I think you don't always need fancy tech. You don't always need a fancy solution. I mean, it can be as simple as just a side-by-side comparison and trying to create those connections, which I think that's where it's really helpful to have the employers involved in that conversation. It's also really helpful to have some students involved in that conversation, both current students as well as alums, because they can also, just as employers can help provide some translation and help academics not be so jargon heavy or too academic, the employers can provide that translation and feedback, but so can students, right? Even if employers and the institution are on the same page of the competencies and skills they're looking for, an 18-year-old would be like, I don't know what that means. Put that in my context. And even an adult learner coming from another industry trying to get a degree or move into another field may also say, I'm not familiar with that term. I don't know what that means. So having these multiple perspectives can really help us not only create the crosswalk, but make that terminology easy to understand and accessible to the audiences it should pertain to.
Michelle?
Yeah, I appreciate you so much pointing out that translational piece is so important, and not just in terms of like the industry talking with our programs and then looping the students in, but also to really empower the students to be able to especially talk about those things when they're out there on a job interview and so forth. But one of the things I was thinking too that I wanted to ask you all, it comes to my mind, is that I think this is often an untapped resource that we already have on our campus. Like our career centers are often working with industry professionals, right? Because they're creating those partnerships, bringing them to campus, helping to facilitate and identify opportunities for internships for our students. And I wonder, how have you guys seen, if at all, like the academic programs, the colleges and departments working and partnering with the Career Center to be a bridge to those folks, to have those conversations, and then just open up this whole conversation about what they're looking for and what, because I haven't seen it in my years of, I feel like they work in silos so much. So I wonder if you guys have seen that or thought about that as another piece. And I don't know the community colleges, I'm not sure. I'm in a 4-year, so state school in California State University. I'm not sure if the community colleges, if it looks a little different with the career centers, but wondered what you all thought about that.
I think that's an excellent idea. If the Career Center does have partnerships that align with the program that you're building. I know we did a lot of partnerships across departments. So for example, I spent quite a few years in an adult learning program with an organizational leadership, for example. So we partnered with business and those types of things. And then the business department has partnerships, right? And so there's a lot of ways I do think that you can absolutely work together on a campus. Specifically, I have not worked with the Career Center, but I think that's an excellent idea. I think anyone who has those partnerships and willing to work together, absolutely see where it can go.
I love this question from Sarah in the chat. Sometimes the employer requests can bloat the curriculum, as employers can make requests, send a cohort or two through, but then the program certificate no longer has students. What are your strategies in determining meeting the employer requests or needs and creating programs that will last beyond the few years following the initial program deployment? And to sift through, I'm gonna do an addendum to your question as well, to sift through those employer requests, kind of like we have students saying, I hate this about your course, and other students saying, I love this about your course. How do you sift through those employer requests as well?
Well, I'll give Tiffany and Johnna a moment to think about an answer for that, because I do just want to add something to the last question, that career services can be an excellent partner. One of the things we did at my last institution, we had a doctorate in clinical psychology. And as you can imagine, career service staff come with varying backgrounds and just can't know everything, right? And so one of the things that the faculty were working with their students on is, in addition to learning the things in the program, they were like, hey, here's how to market yourself. Here's how to, whether you're going for a job or whether you're looking to strike out with your own practice, here's some things to think about, because they also were practitioners. And there was this awesome opportunity for them to share that insight with career services, so that then career services could get that information. And again, not necessarily be the end all be all there, but build their capacity and have some examples and resources directly from faculty. And then that opened up the door to them talking to more programs and leveraging our internal expertise and better collaborating, right? So that then career services can handle the things they can handle, but then when it gets real nuanced or real specific, especially at higher levels and where student needs are may exceed the capacity of the generalist career service person, that we already have those connections existing with our faculty, so that we are not only leveraging internal and external connections with employers, but also that those internal student affairs to academic affairs connections.
And
Yeah.
I just want to quickly comment on the other question that came up. And, you know, Joe, you had just mentioned those external connections. So to the latter question, the idea of, I think an important point, I love the point about student services, is also existing in that external space as well. So joining workforce committees within the community, hearing what they're talking about, using that as an information source as well. But to the question about curriculum bloat, that idea that we are beholden to a variety of different sources, one of which, and I think of education within the context of many fields as well, are state and national standards. And so in the context of developing relationships and having those conversations and that bi-directional communication that occurs, bringing in what those requirements are in the context of the workforce, in the context of the academic institution, and using those requirements as well to mediate those conversations, to say, okay, what are the competencies that have longevity in the context of the curriculum within the academic environment, within the workforce environment, and using all the resources we have at our disposal to serve to mediate that conversation.
And I'll add to what Johnna said about kind of the preventing bloating, or what do we do with that with employer requests. I think that across many employer meetings, one of the things I have heard the most is a request for, and this is where the term gets, everyone uses different terms, but the request for the soft skills, the non-cognitive skills, the whatever you want to call those skills, the grit. Those are the skills that I feel like it didn't matter which field I was talking to. It was always, I need someone to show up on time. I need someone who can speak well to a customer. I need someone who can, is those types of things, which I feel like we are all held to standards as higher ed faculty that I have to get all of these things in my curriculum based on accreditation standards or accrediting bodies for a specific field, and they have to pass an exam, for example. So in order to be credentialed. And I think that we are so held to those, which is important. And obviously they need that in order to be successful in their field. But I think that we can include those cross-cutting competencies into those other skills that we're teaching. And that's probably a whole nother session, but including those, and how do we assess those together? How do we integrate those? How do we make some of those other requests part of our curriculum without expanding our workload exponentially? So yes, I hear you on the curriculum bloat. And I think sometimes that's about how we do synthesize our assessment, our competencies, and the way that we measure those.
Tiffany, but I think you hit right in the cuff and the nail. It's how do you change curriculum that fast, right? And then especially if you're in a four-year institution or a community college system, and you go through curriculum review, right? And so I know that the private institutions can change curriculum really fast, but at the community college level, that's difficult.
Yes, and I agree. Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead, Tiffany. I was just gonna.
No, I was just gonna say I agree, and I even was at a private institution, and it still took a good amount of time. So I understand that, and I think that's where we talk a lot about continuous improvement and using that data to move forward. So you receive feedback and just working with your partnerships and saying, we are incorporating this and this is our process, and letting them know how that cycle works and that you are always in this continuous improvement process and moving towards that. And it doesn't have to be perfect. So I've said that, try to say that quite a bit, just that encouragement around, you don't have to have everything 100% perfect in order to launch a program or run a program, as long as you're always continuously improving based on that data and feedback. But yes, I do know those changes take quite some time.
And the next question I actually had lined up, you guys segued in perfectly, and you hit on a lot of these comments. I'm going to formalize it into a question. I'm going to pop it in the chat as well. Given the importance of making credible and defensible claims of learning, what are some examples of well-aligned assessment types that validate student competencies while also resonating with workforce expectations? How do we ensure that these assessments maintain academic rigor while remaining practical for employers? And you hit on so many of those components, but is there anything you wanted to add?
I mean, I think there's good models of stuff out there in terms of partnerships. You know, even I remember I took this data science and coding course through Coursera back in 2014. And even back then, like they were teaching the content of coding, but they were partnering with different companies to use their data, right? And so the company benefits because they're getting promoted, right? They're getting promoted to this MOOC, and hundreds of thousands of students in there. But then the course benefits because they're using real company data, right? This is a real use case. This is real business application for that company. And this isn't just a mock case study or a hypothetical example. It's real data, real stuff. And so I think this ties in with some of the things we've saying, but just showing that we can definitely do that, right? We can work with our partners and work with employers to give actual case studies, real examples, and refresh that, right? We can have different scenarios, and also, especially with different approaches to complex problems in the business space. There's not always a straight line from A to B, right? Or it's not always one way to do it. And so that's where students can then, give unique responses and bring themselves into those situations while still demonstrating the respective competencies and skills that employers look for. And it becomes not only a good exercise for the student, but then there's a reciprocal element too, that I think, on the employer side, they can also broaden their lens in terms of truly thinking around competencies and being less stuck to, well, we're a business, and unless you have a business background, we're not going to hire you, right? But recognizing, no, we're looking for these sets of skills, and those sets of skills could come from people from all sorts of backgrounds. And so the more they see students demonstrating this learning in different or creative ways, that should also broaden their horizons to be less specific around certain backgrounds and allow people to move into and out of different careers a bit more easily.
I wanted to give an example from Illinois, and Tiffany was very instrumental in this work. And I think one of the things that is relevant about this example is that it didn't involve changing the curriculum, but it was the development of an assessment that was very responsive to employer needs, that didn't require a huge shift in curriculum. As I mentioned previously, we have a competency-based assessment system in Illinois that exists in early childhood across every college, university, and community college. And because of that, when employers identified the need to have at the entry level of the early childhood field for individuals who are in the incumbent workforce, who were teacher assistants, some instrument that could measure their competencies and give them college credit as an entry to college credit. We were able collaboratively, again, Tiffany was a lead in this, to develop a immersion assessment that was easily accessible, easy to deploy around the state, and something that was incredibly responsive to employer needs. But again, it was because of that standardized rubric that was agreed upon across higher education faculty and employers, and had collaborative input across the state.
I think that's such a great example of the next question I had queued up. It's just amazing. You guys are like mind readers. And this is something I really feel personal about because it kind of speaks to the early movement of badges, but moving beyond that. So how can higher education institutions design credentials that serve as a common and useful currency between academia and industry? What steps can colleges take to ensure that these credentials are not only transparent, but are also widely recognized and respected by employers across various sectors?
I can start, and then I know probably Johnna and Joe probably have a lot to build on this as well. But I think Johnna brought up an excellent point about something that a currency that's able to be used across institutions is a big deal. And I think that Illinois is such an excellent example of a state and a community really that came together and worked on that together, because there has to be agreement, right? If I'm going to accept a currency, I have to accept the way that you're defining it. I probably had to have been a part of that and breathe into that. And I think for something to be a currency with employer partners, for example, again, engaging them, letting them experience the assessments. What does a learner have to do in order to earn that currency, that badge, or whatever it is that you're using as that currency? And I think that's how you get a lot of that participation. So even to the earlier questions of how do you engage partners, let them experience it. I think one of the ways that I've seen work best with engaging employer partners or partnerships in this way is, hey, come experience this yourself. Experience our assessment. We don't have to score you, right? But experience it. Go through the simulation exercise, or experience the work-based assessment exercise, and then letting them see the rubrics. This is what a learner must do in order to earn this credential, and how you hold them to that. And so they know that if somebody holds your badge, I think credibility behind the credential or the currency, whatever that is for you all, is that it means something, right? It's meaningful and relevant. So one, it's relevant to the workplace role they're concerned about. And then secondly, do those learners come out, or do your graduates, are they actually able to successfully perform in that workplace role? And that's when I think you get the meaningfulness, I guess, behind that currency.
Tiffany, do you feel that you can extend that currency? For example, if you're a community college and say students want to transfer to a state university or UC, to have that currency open up and extend it to both colleges. For example, Fresno State College, a lot of students transfer to Fresno State, and they're a state institution. So that currency should be extended to Fresno State also, right?
I honestly, I think that that's really about the willingness to collaborate and be open to that. I know that Johnna has experience there, so I don't want to put you on the spot, Johnna, but I know that you could probably speak really well to being able to use that as a currency across 2-year and 4-year institutions. It is possible. We do know that.
Because you can carry, I mentioned badging, right? If you can carry that badging, to a higher ed too, that would be also wonderful.
And what's even another neat idea, which I've been a part of as a program we built in the healthcare space, is a certain number of those badges may be equivalent to an increase in wage. And so how can we not only connect between institutions, but then also, again, with our workforce partners? So if they're behind your badges as much, if they see the credibility and validity in your badges, are they then also willing to participate in collaboration with you to recognize that badge in some way in the workplace role, which just creates a circle of motivation, right, for that learner.
And I'll just comment very briefly that our original competency-based assessment system was designed to solve issues of articulation. And that is why we originally got 2- and 4-year institutions together. We have not been successful with badging to date because we just don't have the infrastructural technology in place yet. However, we do have in our rule, in our governmental rule, that the associate of applied science degree has to transfer to four-year universities. And so that is how we have successfully negotiated some of the historic issues of transfer between 2- and 4-year institutions.
I mean, some of that is on the institutions to kind of buck the historical systems they've had of holding certain sometimes arbitrary standards of like, well, our curriculum says you need English 321 titled Britain drama, and yours is English 320 British drama, so we're not going to accept that, right? Like, some of that is where they need to actually look at the learning outcomes of what students are learning and be more open. One of the things, as I'm sure Johnna knows, is Illinois has an articulation system where, as you generate general education courses, you have to get it certified with this Illinois statewide system, so that's guaranteeing these gen ed courses will transfer to any Illinois institute or institution. And that's great. Now, unfortunately, that's a state thing, so that's not a national thing. But that's a great example of how states can be doing their part to try and help institutions to recognize the portability of student learning, and that can come even outside of the specific course name and definition. And I think that can open the doors more to then possibilities around badging. I mean, that's where ACE as an entity also looks and tries to standardize some non higher education institution experiences for credit, that they put that out there, and so institutions can use ACE as its guide. They have a military guide even for helping military students port their experiences into an educational environment. And so there's things out there and entities out there trying to make this easier and more possible. And they're vetted industry entities, right? They're not like a fly-by-night operation. They've been around for decades, but it's up to the institution to accept those and use those. And I think that's where the institution can be doing their own self-reflection and work around truly understanding what constitutes learning and what they're really willing to do to recognize and identify that.
What better way to buck the system than to throw you a question about generative AI? So we have one in the chat. In addition to the soft skills that employers are looking for, what type of generative AI skills are employers wanting in new employees? And then I'm going to add that to that again. And how do we address that in academia? That's an easy question, right?
No concept of what employers may be looking for with AI, because I'm been way more immersed in, one, how do I use it, and two, what our institution is doing and what higher ed is doing. Where I think honestly, higher ed is still grappling with what and how and what we should allow, how we should think about it. Is it a taboo topic? Is it something we should try and prevent people from using? And so I have to admit, I don't even know what employers might be expecting, other than I would assume they're going to want some awareness and competency of it in terms of using it to some extent, because I think part of the conversation around AI as well is really getting specific about what we mean, right? Because there are some forms of AI we've been using for decades. So some people may not realize they already have AI usage skills, but if we're talking about brand new, like large language models and AI for specific purposes, I think that's where we can help hone in on what employers are looking for. And I think that's where we can make some direct ties to existing pieces, right? Like, if an employer is looking for your ability to analyze a proposal or offer consulting to a partner based on certain circumstances and conditions, they're still going to want you to be able to do that skill, but you can maybe set yourself apart by saying, not only do I know how to do this, but here are all the different tools and mechanisms that I use to help me do that work, AI being one of them. And so then that way, if they are a bit more AI curious or interested, they may then talk to you more about that, or you can position yourself in showing, not only do I know this tool, but I have this, I am using skills to, I'm using AI to help, expand on or make my skills more exponentially effective, as opposed to just saying like, oh yeah, I know how to use AI because it makes everything easier, right? But truly showing that it's a tool that can be leveraged to expand on your skill set.
And I think to add on that onto the individual skill set, like I can use it for critical thinking, but how I'm talking about, say, early childhood, how does generative AI play into those specific competencies and those specific skill sets, and exploring that? I know that's what I'm trying to figure out in my practicum courses that I teach in early childhood. Tiffany or Johnna, anything to add?
I do not have anything to add. Thank you.
I was just thinking while we're sitting here and listening to Joe speak about it, my thought was that'll become a competency in and of itself soon, right? Because written communication is a competency. I mean, you see each type. So I'd imagine soon we'll be adding that to our competency sets. What does that look like in the context of each field, and what do we do with it?
And to Joe's point earlier, this might be a great opportunity to partner with employers, because they also don't know. They're trying to figure it out as well. What are the skills that my employees need to know for AI? What a great opportunity to learn alongside the employers, instead of it being academia, no, we don't use AI, and employers going, yes, we have to use it. How can we come together and facilitate the conversation of, we know there are things to be concerned about, we know there's things that are going to be great about it. How can we travel this road together? Wouldn't that be just amazing? Maybe someday we'll get there. All right, so the next question I have for you, and this is all on fun data. What role does data play in refining competency-based assessments and program alignment? How can institutions leverage feedback from employers and graduates to continuously improve their alignment with workforce demands?
I'll kick us off a little bit here. I think that data is just it's what we can lean on, right, for all aspects of what we're doing as faculty. So I think that three primary purposes of data that we receive, right, is feedback to the learner. It should be growth feedback, a loop between the instructor and the learner for that growth. I think secondly, it's a benchmark. Are my learners making progress, right, towards the end goal, towards their competencies? And then third, it should always be that informing us of, again, continuous improvement process. So that's the data we can use, I guess, in-house, so to speak, is where are my learners? Where are all of my learners struggling, right? Where are the majority struggling, and what do I need to do and make changes there in my curriculum? What's going well? All of that feedback, I guess, in-house. And then, like we've spoken about before, engaging partners. Yes, focus groups and those types of things. You can also do surveys. Again, let them take your assessments, right? If your assessments are geared towards graduates who can perform in the workplace role successfully, then those people, that feedback is valuable. What does that workplace role look like? And when you engage in our assessments, for example, or look at our curriculum, what are you seeing, right? And taking that data and, again, just pulling that in as part of that continuous improvement process. And I think what's important to what Johnna said earlier, it doesn't always necessarily mean, right, that you're changing those outcomes that may require approval. It may just be that, hey, we are going to make adjustments to our assessment processes. We're going to make adjustments to our learning journeys, and take that data and make those adjustments when not necessarily needing to go back through for approvals at the systems level and that sort of thing.
I thought that was, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I thought that was such a comprehensive description from a community college perspective. We're often looking at between institution data. So the data from, Tiffany, you highlighted the data of, graduates to the workforce. We're looking at it as our graduates move on to other institutions, that feedback loop as well. And one piece of data that, just because of how our state is configured with our assessment system, we're always looking to our industry recognized credential and completion and data in that capacity. One of the other things that we've really started to look at as well is data across our disciplines in terms of learner progression. And that has been an incredibly just rich source of information in terms of competency progression. And so I so appreciated those within institution loops that you highlighted, and I just wanted to flesh that out just a little bit more from our perspective.
And Joe, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second because I had the opportunity to attend your last session where you're showing some of those dashboards that you created. Is there anything that you would envision of taking employer feedback in this question and incorporating those in some sort of dashboards for faculty and campus stakeholders to be able to see that?
I think that's one of the things that it ties well to what Tiffany and Johnna were just talking about, which even among assessment and data-minded folks like ourselves, it can be intimidating to try and do something new, or to, some of these questions are well worded and comprehensive, and that can be intimidating to try and answer. So one of the things that I think is really important for institutions to keep in mind is having a manageable approach, right? You don't have to solve for every employer, every program right now, right? You can pick one metric to better align with and represent employers now across every program. Or you could pick one program or one partner, one employer, one industry. But, going to speaking to like my last session and talking about program review, one of the really powerful things that's helped faculty feel seen and heard and data be more meaningful is getting the buy-in around the specific metrics. And we've been on a journey where we started with a ton of metrics and then we whittled it down to just a select few. And I think that's an important thing of both from the employer side and the institution side. Let's come to an agreement on, just to start a few metrics that we agree on, that are important, that are relevant, that matter to both parties. And let's find ways to integrate that. And then we can go from there, because that'll at least be a proof case of how'd this work? Could this have been better? Also, do we thought this data would be helpful and informative? Is it actually helpful and informative? Is it more meaningful for us, more meaningful for them? How can we do better and build from that, right? Because I think it can be daunting and challenging if you try and do too much too fast, or if you're trying to please everybody, because then we're already swimming in data and not using near enough of it as we could be. And so we also don't want to set ourselves up for making promises or that we will meet and do everything for everyone, because then we're going to be run ragged and we're not going to be pleasing or helping anybody.
I love that. I have a tendency to get excited about things, and I've got a lot of people in my college that try to wheel me back in because I want to do all the things all at once. And so I think that's a really great reminder for all of us to think about one step at a time. We don't have to do everything right now. We can approach this small and then grow. So what a powerful reminder. I appreciate that. Tiffany or Johnna, anything to add? All right. So this next question is actually very personal to me. I not personal to me, it's applicable to everybody, but I have a large stake in it. I teach at a medium-sized, very rural community college. So access to resources are something that our students struggle with. So the question is, how can institutions ensure that competency-based education models are equitable, providing all students, regardless of background, access to the resources and support needed to succeed in both learning and assessment. And as you're processing that, one of the ways I take this very personally is I teach early childhood along with being outcome assessment. And so when we're looking at demonstration of competencies, one of the proposals is, well, if they can't get to our campus-based lab school, they can just record themselves in a center, demonstrating these skills. Well, the struggle with resources is, do they have access to that technology? And we're in a rural campus. We actually have a huge childcare issue where there aren't sites for them to go and be able to record themselves demonstrating those competencies. So they have to find transportation to the big city of Fresno to find a childcare. And we don't have a transportation system. So how do they get to those childcare centers to record it? And then that is with the understanding that they aren't working a 12-hour shift at a packing house to be able to do that. So as we thought about that, this question really resonates strongly with me in a rural area. And I'm sure many other people are struggling with that as well. So any insights?
I think that competency-based education, if you're thinking, so when I'm saying this, I'm thinking assessment. So a lot of when I'm leaning on when I talk about competency-based education is that building to performance, so that assessment piece and performance-based assessments. And I think just speaking specifically to performance-based assessments, the feedback I feel like we often hear from students is they feel like it's a much more equitable experience because if they've been in the workforce, and you'll talk to students who may want to return to a program or may want to go back and pursue higher education. And one of the biggest barriers, as we all know, is all of the writing, right? You hear so often students like, I don't want to write papers. I can't write papers. And not that, again, there is not a time and place for that. But I do think that things like performance-based assessments do offer that equitable opportunity for students to come in and show what they're able to do. Sorry, I can't speak today. What they're able to do and maybe what they've been doing for the last 10 years, for example, or 15 years. And you'll often hear learners say that of, gosh, I've been in early education. I've been a teacher assistant or a teacher in early education for 10 years. If I could just show what I can do, that's like very equitable, I think, experience for them versus having to do a lot of writing or do a lot of those things that, again, we all value, and there's certainly a place for that, but it also gets back to authenticity of the assessment and what are we actually measuring? What are we truly measuring and what do we need to measure? And I think that competency-based education really does cut to the core of that.
And if I may just quickly piggyback on that, a assessment project that Tiffany and I worked on last year relative to an apprenticeship project that really part of the design touched on many of the things you just described because we were focusing on rural areas and how do we support individuals who need to authentically capture what they're doing in classrooms. And we landed on GoPro cameras. We were looking at using GoPro cameras. We were looking at using swivel cameras, and we finally landed on GoPros and went through training for how to capture the data, met with employer partners for what data should be authentically captured at what points in time, but really thinking about when there are issues of access, and we can't send somebody out to these sites to capture the data, what are the most authentic, accessible, and responsive ways to get this information.
I have a bad habit of cutting people off, so I've had to count in my head to make sure I give everybody thinking time. So thank you very much for that. The next question involves faculty buy-in, which is always a fun topic to talk about. Faculty play a central role in implementing competency-based education, but buy-in can sometimes be a challenge. What strategies or examples can you share for engaging faculty in designing and supporting competency-based curriculum and assessment practices?
I can just start from kind of the assessment side, and then Tiffany and Johnna can pick up continuing on assessment or CBE. But I think one of the most important things is making sure they have a role and they know their role. And I think sometimes we can approach whether it's design or storytelling or using data that it can be somewhat of a mandate or a top down, like you are going to do this, as opposed to framing it as we have this great opportunity to build this thing together, right? And you will be the champion of this work and this program, and you can be the voice of these students, or better yet, create a platform for students to demonstrate and tell their own stories of the benefits of assessment or competency-based education. And I think when we do that and empower faculty, they'll get excited and they'll want to engage a bit more. But I think we have to authentically position them for success, right? And not just add this on as an additional responsibility or expectation, but to create the space. And that's, which again, Tiffany and Johnny can talk more about it, but that's one of the cool things of a lot of CBE models is they unbundle the faculty experience a bit. And so you have these different faculty roles so that you can distribute that load a little bit and you can handle and approach this whole educational ecosystem and environment in a different way. And if you try and do it too much with the traditional mindset and load of a typical faculty member, yeah, it might not work so well, or that you might be overloading them, or also they may not have the background for it or the desire, right? They may, I just want to teach, or I just want to grade, and that's one of the cool things about some CBE models. Like, great, yeah, we will have an assessor, we will have like an instructor, we will have an advisor, and so I think that's one of the nice things for CBE that potentially more traditional programs could benefit from is trying to think beyond the traditional model and leveraging the strengths and skills and interests of faculty to put them in positions to best do the work that we should be doing.
Thank you, Joe. I think also it's also a part of the college, right? It depends on the campus or institution culture, and that for example, academic senate. What do they think about those external or internal uh, factors that play a role of CBE, right?
I've seen several examples of creativity around this. And so, Joe, I really appreciate you, saying some people unbundle, some people, I think everyone approaches it differently. Like you said, as well as, it depends on the culture of your institution. Is it like, well, you're allowed to do that in your program, but nobody else is going to, or, there are a lot of different cultures and the way that they approach, I think, CBE. And there's an example of when I was in higher education, we were building a program and it was not going to be an institution thing. It was going to be more of a program level thing. And we needed general education courses and we wanted to build a full program. And so one thing that we did that ended up being successful was finding a champion in each department, I guess I would say, from each department who was willing to engage in this journey with us. And we met with them regularly. We did a lot of education around what competency-based education is, because I think there's a lot of misconception around what it actually is. Really dug into the design. So designing a course, what assessments look like, and the why behind all of that. And then we did try to do things like, if they had a full load, could we get approval for something like a little bit of a release time, right, to redesign this course, or if you could pay them some type of stipend is always helpful. And then creative things like we recognize them as what we call faculty fellow. So graduations, they wore a different medallion, for example, and just things like that, where it's like acknowledging the hard work people are putting in. And I will say, some of the biggest resistors end up becoming our strongest champions. And then from there, that was so helpful because it just, their message that they were then able to share with others was so helpful in bringing others on board. So there were several faculty who ended up saying, you know, they came back and said, I'm going to redesign all of my courses because these things are just strong educational practices. So I think you can be very creative about getting faculty on board. But I agree, Joe. I think it's finding your champions first who are willing just to even try and going from there.
And I think that's key, Tiffany. I think like Jerry mentioned, I put it in the chat, and he beat me to it. There has to be a buy-in from the faculty, primary, and also the administration. I mean, they go hand in hand together, right? And so, John, anything do you want to add?
No, I was so appreciative of the description of the sort of supportive process, and Joe, your use of the term authentically. I just really thought both of what you each said was very powerful. Thank you.
And I appreciate, Joe, the excitement that you share, and I could see it on your face. And whenever I talk to faculty, that's something I also try and approach. I think this is the opportunity to invigorate your teaching again, to get back to those roots. You did this because you love your discipline. And to me, the competency-based education piece allows you to get down to those roots of what you loved and get away from the extra credit and the points and all of those things we hate about teaching, down to why I teach is to share what I love and inspire those. So it seems sometimes reframing that with faculty, it's this, oh, I didn't think about it that way, because they get so stuck on either the hard or, well, I heard I'm going to have to do this. Well, let's not talk about that. First, you're wrong, but let's not talk about that. Let's talk about what it is and what it allows you to do that you haven't been able to do for the last 20 years of your teaching. So I appreciate that excitement that you bring to it, because it's often just about the rules and the regulations and the non-fun part. But for me as an educator, this is the fun things that I'm so looking forward to being able to implement in my classroom. We have about 2 more minutes. Any parting thoughts from our panelists?
My only parting thought is what you just said. I mean, being an assessment and accreditation person, those are often some scarlet A's that people try to avoid. And so what I think really helps the culture and success is approaching it with that enthusiasm and reminding people the underlying principles of the work, right? Continuous improvement and evidencing against the hopes we have for our learning. And that should be exciting. People should want to look at those things. And again, with accreditation, it's this opportunity to tell our story to other people. And that should be exciting to talk. We should be proud of the work we're doing. And so that's my little bit there, trying to change hearts and minds around this work, because I know sometimes it can be stressful, it can be overwhelming. But as you said, Amanda, it's remembering why we're doing this work and that we're all educators and we're all working for student success.
Joanna,
Oh, I just was going to say, I just love that. And just really thinking about that assessment as the heart of teaching and learning, and just how important that is for students. And so I just wanted to echo what you said.
Joanna, thank you so much. Tiffany, Joe, thank you for this wonderful panel discussion. Amanda, thank you for your guidance into this session. Thank you all. We have a break and then we go straight into our session 3. You want to add into Amanda?
Nope, just thank you for joining. And panelists, we appreciate this, the mid-afternoon, Friday afternoon spot. Such great information to be able to go into our weekend. So we'll see everybody at the next 2 o'clock session and at our closing later.